There's something deeply unsettling about an empty water park. The slides are still there. The wave pool is still there. The faded signs still promise fun, but nobody's coming. The gates are locked, the water is long gone, and in some cases, the whole thing is just quietly rotting in a desert or disappearing under a layer of kudzu. These places were packed to capacity not that long ago, and now they're ghost towns with water slides. So here are the 14 abandoned American water parks I bet you didn't know about. Number 14, Lake Dolores Water Park, Newberry Springs, California. Let's start with the most famous one, which is saying something because this park spent decades as one of the least famous things in the Mojave Desert. Lake Dolores started in 1962 as a private campground built by a local businessman named Bob Byers, out in the middle of the California desert off Interstate 15, roughly halfway between Las Vegas and Los Angeles. Byers built the whole thing around a 273-acre man-made lake fed by underground springs from the Mojave Aquifer. Over the next 25 years, he gradually added rides and slides, and what began as a family getaway evolved into a full water park, advertised on television with the slogan, "The Fun Spot of the Desert." The park's signature attraction was a row of 8 identical 150-foot steel water slides mounted side by side on a man-made hill. Riders on small plastic floaties would shoot off the end and skim 40 to 50 yards across the lagoon. There was also a zipcord ride where you hung from a hand grip and released above the water. None of this would pass modern safety review, but people loved it. By the late 1980s, attendance had dropped and the original park closed. Byers sold it in 1990 to new investors who transformed it into a 1950s-themed park called Rockahula, which reopened on July 4th, 1998. 2 years later, an employee was paralyzed after riding a slide called the Doo-Wop Super Drop and sued for over $4 million. The park never financially recovered. It filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in February 2000, and by August that year, the bankruptcy had converted to Chapter 7 liquidation. After a brief attempt to reopen as Discovery Water Park in 2002, the place operated only intermittently before shutting for good in 2004. Today, the site is private property, fenced off, and theoretically off limits. Though that hasn't stopped the place from appearing in a Kesha music video, a BTS mini concert filmed in 2022, a Tony Hawk Mini Cooper commercial, and countless urban exploration videos. The slides are still out there in the desert, bleached and cracking. Somehow that feels right. Number 13, River Country, Walt Disney World, Florida. Here's one that genuinely surprises people. Disney has an abandoned water park. River Country opened on June 20th, 1976, as Walt Disney World's very first water park. It was built into the shores of Bay Lake, adjacent to Fort Wilderness Campground, and had a hillbilly swimming hole theme. Rope swings, a tire swing, a boom swing, T-bar drops, and water slides called Whoopin' Holler Hollow. The whole thing used actual filtered lake water from Bay Lake, which gave it a more natural feel than your typical park. It was genuinely charming in an era when Disney was still finding its footing outside the Magic Kingdom. For years, it was genuinely popular, but as Walt Disney World expanded, Epcot in 1982, MGM Studios in 1989, Typhoon Lagoon in 1989, Blizzard Beach in 1995, River Country increasingly felt like the smallest, most dated option on property. Each new park that opened made River Country look a little more like a relic. The park's attendance declined steadily as guests chose to spend their limited park time at newer, larger facilities. And then, September 11, 2001 happened, and Disney's overall business took a significant hit. That November, River Country closed for the season, as it always did. It never reopened. Disney quietly announced in 2005 that the park was permanently closed, citing the cost of restoration and a determination that guest demand wasn't sufficient to justify the investment. What made the situation unusual, even by Disney standards, was that they didn't demolish it. For years, the abandoned slides and pools sat visible from Fort Wilderness, with the lights still occasionally on and music still playing in the areas Disney kept active for Mickey's Backyard BBQ next door. Urban explorers documented its steady decay, which attracted enough media attention that in 2016, Disney finally drained and cemented over the old pool. The site has since been cleared as part of development for a new resort, which means the physical evidence is gone. But for a decade and a half, one of the world's most meticulous entertainment companies just left a water park to rot on its own property. Urban explorer and photographer Seth Lawless, who published photos of the abandoned park in 2016, was blunt about it in an interview with BBC News. No billion-dollar company should be powerful enough not to clear up their own mess. Disney did eventually address it. Eventually. Number 12. Waterworld USA, Sacramento, California. This one has a slightly different story because it technically didn't die. It transformed. But for a long stretch, it was as close to abandoned as a major facility can get. Waterworld USA opened at the CalExpo grounds in Sacramento in 1980. For more than 2 decades, it was a summer staple for Central Valley families. The park operated with Marine World Africa USA under shared management, and for a time, a season pass to Marine World also got you into both Waterworld locations. The park changed hands as Premier Parks acquired it in 1996, then became part of Six Flags Empire in 1998. It was rebranded as Six Flags Waterworld in 2003. Then, in 2006, Six Flags announced it would not renew its lease with CalExpo. The park's final day of operation as a Six Flags property was September 23, 2006. The CalExpo grounds then sat with this massive water park infrastructure just going nowhere for a significant period. The site eventually reopened under new operators as Raging Waters Sacramento, but between closures and periods of neglect, it developed a reputation for being visibly run down. Visitors on travel forums in the late 2000s diplomatically described it as showing its age. One forum commenter in Tucson put it more honestly: they'd been told it was worth the drive from the Bay Area, and it wasn't. Drone footage from urban explorers during its dormant phases shows the full extent of what extended neglect does to a water park. The park is currently operating under the Raging Waters banner, so it isn't fully abandoned. But its long journey through corporate indifference, decay, and attempted revival makes it one of the more honest portraits on this list of what happens when a regional institution loses its operator and nobody can agree on what to do with the infrastructure that's left behind. Number 11. Ebenezer Floppen, Sloppers' Wonderful Water Slides, Lansing, Illinois. If nothing else, the name deserves some recognition. Businessman Mark Collar wanted to build a water park in the Chicago suburbs in the early 1980s. The problem was that the area is flat. You need hills for water slides. Collar's solution was elegant in a truly deranged way. He built the park on a landfill locally known as Mount Trashmore. 2 800-foot concrete water slides were constructed on the mound of compacted garbage. And Ebenezer Floppen Sloppers' Wonderful Water Slides opened on July 5, 1980. According to a Chicago Tribune report, the park had paid for itself by August of that same year. Business was booming through the early and mid-1980s. The Digital Research Library of Illinois History documented it as a major local attraction. But by the end of the decade, the park's appeal had faded and it closed. The slides sat on their landfill hill, slowly weathering, while the surrounding neighborhood went about its business. It's a relatively obscure entry on this list. You won't find much footage of it. But as a piece of Midwestern ingenuity, it deserves its moment. Number 10. Fort Rapids Indoor Water Park, Columbus, Ohio. This one has the distinction of being described by urban explorers as America's largest abandoned indoor water park, which is not a title anyone was hoping to earn. The concept itself was legitimate. Dublin-based Platinum Lodging LLC took an old Holiday Inn on Columbus's east side near I-70 and Hamilton Road, invested roughly $45 million in renovations, and opened Ohio's first indoor water park resort in May 2006. The Wild West theme was committed. Murals, wooden beams, Wild West signage throughout, a lazy river called Cowboy Creek, 12 slides, a 4-story interactive play structure with a 1,000-gallon tipping barrel at the top, a whirlpool, and an arcade. Families from Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Dayton drove down specifically to go swimming in January. The idea worked, at least for a while. Less than 2 years after opening, the owners were already looking for a buyer. The 2008 recession hit the tourism sector, and a property that had cost $45 million to renovate sold for $6 million in 2008. That gap says everything. What followed was a decade of ownership changes, mounting code violations, and a steady accumulation of maintenance failures that would have been alarming even individually. Bed bugs in the hotel rooms, roaches, mold, improper food handling, non-functional fire pumps, and broken sprinkler systems, and air quality that guests and inspectors described as genuinely hazardous. The Better Business Bureau gave it an F rating. Columbus police closed the park in February 2016 after an emergency inspection found conditions described as unbearable. Guests were told to leave the building immediately. A month later, an 8-year-old was robbed of his hoverboard at gunpoint in the parking lot, which at that point was arguably the least of the property's problems. The story didn't end there. The property has been mired in court battles ever since. In June 2024, owner Jeff Kern was held in contempt of court and ordered to pay a $199,000 fine plus $2,000 daily until the property met safety codes. He failed to appear at a compliance hearing. Then in October 2024, a fire broke out overnight, burned for hours, and caused structural damage severe enough that part of the building required demolition. The Wild West slides are still in there somewhere behind the damage. No one has turned the water back on. Number 9. Wild Waters, Silver Springs, Florida. Wild Waters has the distinction of being one of the first water parks in the entire South, and also one of the more heartbreaking closures on this list, because it wasn't mismanagement or bankruptcy that finished it off. It was a state government deciding the land was better used as a park entrance. Built in 1978 by ABC Television, yes, the broadcast network, Wild Waters was the sister park to the historic Silver Springs Nature Theme Park in Silver Springs, Florida. ABC developed it as a companion attraction to Silver Springs, which had been a major tourist destination since the 1870s and was famous for its glass-bottom boat tours. Wild Waters was also among the first water parks in the nation to use fiberglass flumes, something that eventually became industry standard. For decades, it drew visitors who wanted a more relaxed, tree-shaded water park experience next to one of Florida's most beautiful natural springs. But increased development in the region caused pollution problems and decreased water flow in the springs themselves. In January 2013, the Florida state government took over Silver Springs and folded it into Silver Springs State Park. The state then struggled with what to do with Wild Waters. The answer, announced in August 2016, was to close it permanently, demolish it, and use the land as a second entrance to the state park. Wild Waters shut its gates on September 5, 2016. Demolition began in December 2018. By April 2019, almost nothing was left. People who grew up going there were not quiet about it. Comment sections on Florida Urbex pages filled with memories from people who spent summers riding Osceola's Revenge and Bunyan's Bend. One of the few things Ocala had going for it, one person wrote, they took away. Number 8. Breakers Water Park, Marana, Arizona. Breakers holds the unfortunate distinction of being the last water park in the Tucson area, and its closure in 2018 meant that anyone in the region who wanted a water park fix now had to drive to Phoenix. The park opened in 1982 at 8555 West Tangerine Road in Marana, just off I-10, and for years it was the default summer destination for Tucson families. Its biggest draw was a wave pool that allegedly held up to 1.3 million gallons of water, one of the largest in the United States. Through the 1990s and 2000s, the park added slides, a children's splash area, and eventually an interactive aquarium exhibit called the Exploraquarium. The problems were well documented online before the park even closed. Reviews frequently cited broken rides, deferred maintenance, and slides that were past their prime. Then in 2018, Breakers simply didn't open for the season. The owner, as quoted by Marana Mayor Ed Honea, said directly, "I had to close. Minimum wage was taking all my profit." Whether the rising minimum wage was the real culprit or just the last straw in a collapsing business model, the result was the same. Tucsonans arrived for the summer to find the phone number disconnected, the website offline, and the wave pool bone dry. Today, the site is in the process of being demolished. Everyone who came as a kid feels the absence. The police officers who responded when a German photographer visited to document the ruins recalled their own childhood trips to Breakers with genuine warmth, according to the photographer's account, right before telling him he was trespassing. Number 7. Wildwater Kingdom, Aurora, Ohio. Wildwater Kingdom's story is essentially a case study in what happens when corporate decisions made on spreadsheets collide with actual communities. The site had been SeaWorld, Ohio from 1970 to 2000, drawing families from across the Midwest for 3 decades. SeaWorld Park sold it to Six Flags in 2001, who combined it with Six Flags Ohio to form Six Flags Worlds of Adventure. Cedar Fair purchased Worlds of Adventure in 2004 and immediately saw the problem. The combined park was too much for the regional market. Attendance had dropped 74% from 2.7 million in 2001 to 700,000 in 2004. Something had to give. Cedar Fair converted the marine life section into a new water park called Wildwater Kingdom and opened it in 2005 with a first phase costing $16 million. The amusement park side continued operating until 2007, when Cedar Fair closed it, sold the rides at auction, and left Wildwater Kingdom as a standalone water park. The park featured 15 water slides, including Thunder Falls, Ohio's tallest water slide complex, along with a 30,000 square foot wave pool added in 2006. For 9 years, the water park held on. Then, on August 19, 2016, Cedar Fair announced permanent closure. In a corporate press release, they described it as the right time to transition the property into redevelopment. The final day was September 5, 2016. The last remaining attractions were demolished in November 2017. Ground broke on a mixed-use residential and commercial development in August 2020. The site that had been SeaWorld, then Six Flags, then a Cedar Fair water park, a place that had entertained millions of people for nearly 50 years, is now being turned into housing and retail, which is about as clean a metaphor for the arc of American leisure parks as you're going to find. Number 6, Water Wonderland, between Midland and Odessa, Texas. Water Wonderland opened in 1980 on 16 acres off Highway 80 between Midland and Odessa, the only water park for miles in either direction, which in West Texas is both a business advantage and a logistical statement about optimism. The park started with some genuinely unusual attractions. The area that would eventually become the wave pool was originally a speedboat track, which was removed after too many accidents made the insurance costs prohibitive. a zip line where riders free fell into the water, bumper cars, a mini Ferris wheel that was part of a small carnival section in the early years, later torn out and never replaced. At its peak, it occupied all 16 acres with slides, a lazy river, a wave pool, and a mini golf course. In a region where summer heat is not a suggestion but a condition, West Texans came in genuinely large numbers because there simply wasn't anywhere else to go. The decline had a specific shape. In 1994, the park filed for bankruptcy. 2 years later, a lawsuit over a ride malfunction that injured a child added further financial weight. The original owners eventually lost the lease. The city of Odessa had been leasing the property and lost the bid to renew in 1995. New owners came in, renamed the park Heroes Waterworld, and tried to keep it running. They went bankrupt too. The park closed permanently in the early 2000s. What followed was nearly 2 decades of slow deterioration. Weeds consumed the slides. Graffiti covered every surface. Wild animals moved in, by multiple accounts. In 2022, a demolition crew arrived and spent over a week knocking the whole thing down to clear the land for commercial development. One of the contractors told a local news crew that being part of the demolition had him and his crew reminiscing about childhood trips to the park. They saved part of the iconic blue slide and had it refurbished and relocated. It was that kind of place. Number 5, Waterworld/Six Flags Astroworld, Houston, Texas. This entry is really about 2 parks that ended as one, so it's worth being precise. Waterworld opened in June 1983 as a standalone, separate admission water park on a 10-acre plot directly east of Astroworld, accessible originally only by a narrow-gauge train called the 610 Limited. It was Houston's first major water park. The 1.9 million gallon facility had a 200-foot wave pool called Breaker Beach, water slides with names like Wipeout, Typhoon, Tidal Wave, and Hurricane, a lagoon with waterfalls and diving platforms, and its own ticketing structure, initially $8.95 on top of Astroworld's $12.50 admission. In 2002, Six Flags merged the 2 operations, built additional walkways between them, and made the combined admission one price. That merger is the reason Waterworld belongs on this list alongside Astroworld. When Six Flags announced the permanent closure on September 12, 2005, both parks closed together on October 30th, the final night of Fright Fest. Both were demolished. The 10-acre water park that had operated independently for nearly 20 years simply ceased to exist as part of the same decision that ended Astroworld's 37-year run. The land where both parks stood was sold for $77 million, against real estate estimates that had valued it as high as $150 million. Whatever the math, the result was the same. Houston, a city of well over 2 million people, went from having a theme park and a water park to having a very large overflow parking lot for the rodeo. The pedestrian bridge over Loop 610, built in 1967 to connect the Astrodome to Astroworld, still stands. The lampposts still line it. The flower beds between them are long neglected. The bridge connects the Astrodome to an empty field. It is technically the last physical remnant of either park, and it goes precisely nowhere. Number 4, Goga Lake's Water Park, Hurricane Hannah's, Aurora, Ohio. Wait, didn't we already cover Wildwater Kingdom in Aurora? Yes, but the same site had a separate, earlier water park that deserves its own entry. Before Wildwater Kingdom, Goga Lake had operated its own water park for more than 2 decades. During the Six Flags ownership era, it ran as Hurricane Harbor. When Cedar Fair took over in 2004, they renamed it Hurricane Hannah's. But Cedar Fair had bigger plans for the marine life section of the property, so Hurricane Hannah's was closed permanently after the 2005 season and sat fenced off and vacant during the 2006 and 2007 seasons while Wildwater Kingdom operated on the neighboring property. So you had, simultaneously, one abandoned water park right next to an operational one, both on the same former SeaWorld grounds, only in the amusement park industry. Number 3, Opryland USA, water attractions. Nashville, Tennessee. Opryland USA wasn't strictly a water park. It was marketed as the home of American music, a full theme park built around live musical performances and country music culture. But it had water rides and wet attractions integrated throughout. And for a generation of Nashville visitors, the combination of live country music and getting soaked on the Grizzly River Rampage was peak summer. The park opened on May 27, 1972, and by the late 1970s, was drawing nearly 2 million guests annually. It was Nashville's biggest tourist attraction for years. And notably, the closest comparable theme parks were 4 to 6 hours away in Cincinnati or Atlanta, which meant Opryland had the entire Mid-South largely to itself. In 1981, the park expanded with a new area called Grizzly Country, which included the Grizzly River Rampage, a river rafting ride. The park was also heavily intertwined with the Nashville Network, TNN, which broadcast live variety shows from inside Opryland and regularly featured the park's grounds as a backdrop for country music programming. By 1997, however, the Gaylord Entertainment Company, which had owned the park since 1983, made the decision to close Opryland and replace it with a shopping mall, specifically the outlet-heavy Opry Mills, which opened on the former park site in 2000. The decision was enormously controversial and remains so. The park was demolished following the 1997 season. Country music fans, Nashville residents, and former park employees were furious. A generation of Tennesseans still brings it up, usually with the kind of tone people use when they're talking about something they've never quite forgiven. A shopping mall replaced 25 years of summer memories. Opry Mills is still there, for what it's worth. Number 2, Whitewater, Grand Prairie, Texas. This one has a slightly different arc, and it's worth including precisely because it ended for the most calculated of reasons. Whitewater opened in Grand Prairie, Texas in 1982 as a standalone water park and operated until 1985. That year, Wet 'n Wild, a competing water park chain, purchased the property. The reason wasn't to expand their operations, it was to eliminate a competitor. The park was shut down, the land was repurposed, and the site eventually became a different amusement operation that itself ran into trouble and closed. A car dealership purchased the property in 1996 and had the whole operation dismantled. The water park part of this story is essentially just a profitable water park was purchased and eliminated so that a larger competitor didn't have to compete with it. No economic collapse, no corporate bankruptcy, no natural disaster, no tragic injury, just a business decision. Someone looked at a map and decided that Whitewater was better for them as a dead park than as a living one. That's a fairly cold-blooded way to end an attraction that local families had been using for 3 years. But in terms of pure business logic, it worked exactly as intended. The park no longer existed because someone with more money decided it was worth more closed. There's something almost admirable about the clean efficiency of it if you're the kind of person who can look at that and feel admiration rather than a vague sense of unease. Number 1, Wildwater Kingdom closing day, September 5th, 2016. A footnote worth noting: September 5th, 2016 was, by any measure, a bad day for abandoned water park statistics. Wildwater Kingdom in Aurora, Ohio, closed permanently. Wildwaters in Silver Springs, Florida, closed permanently the same day. 2 completely unrelated parks, in different states, with entirely different histories, shutting down on the same Labor Day weekend. It's not the kind of thing that means anything, really. Seasonal parks tend to close out their seasons around the same time of year, But there's something about that coincidence that stays with you. Two communities losing their water parks on the same afternoon, while families wrung out their towels and drove home for the last time, not necessarily knowing that version of their summer had just ended for good. Water parks are not built to last forever. The economics are brutal. High maintenance costs, weather dependency, short operating seasons in most of the country, aging infrastructure that requires constant reinvestment, and competition from newer, flashier facilities. Most of them were probably going to close eventually. That's just the math. What's striking isn't that they closed, it's what gets left behind. A water slide sitting in the California desert for 2 decades, bleached to the color of old bone. An indoor water park in Ohio with the Wild West signage still on the walls, just sitting there. Faded wave pools full of stagnant rainwater in Florida, with Spanish moss reclaiming the slides. These were places where real people spent real summer days, days they still remember in detail. The smell of sunscreen, the specific temperature of a wave pool, the exact angle of a drop slide they were too scared to ride, and then eventually weren't. The National Amusement Park Historical Association estimates there are approximately 1,000 defunct amusement parks in North America. Water parks are a significant chunk of that number. They open when local demand justifies the investment. They thrive if the economics work out, and they close when they don't, usually leaving behind a complicated mix of nostalgia, litigation, and a lot of concrete that's expensive to remove. If any of these ended up on a list you didn't expect, or if you grew up going to one of them, drop it in the comments. We'd genuinely like to know which ones hit closest to home, and if there are others you think should be on this list, that conversation is absolutely worth having. If you got something out of this video, hit the like button. It genuinely helps the channel reach more people who'd be interested in this kind of thing. And if you want more videos about the places, parks, and stories that shaped American life and then quietly disappeared, subscribe. There are more than enough stories to keep going.